to and about two women, Carole Hopson and aviatrix Bessie Coleman. Both are equally fierce and by definition are history makers who happen to be African American. At the age of 54, Carole became a commercial pilot for United Airlines, and that's after having a successful career as a journalist, then in corporate America, and later a full-time mom. And she is also the author of a fabulous book called A Pair of Wings. And it's a wonderful book, historical fiction novel about Bessie Coleman, the first African-American woman to receive her pilot's license and the first woman to receive her international pilot's license, right? She is also the founder of the Jet Black Foundation and the founder of 100 Pairs of Wings project, which hopes to send 100 Black women to flight school. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But Carole is truly the embodiment of determination, perseverance, and inspiration. And I am so proud to call her my friend. Welcome, Carole. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. And thank you for the introduction. Well, no wonder I sat down on the couch and went to sleep.
You've been busy.
You need a little recharge after all that. How you doing, sweetheart?
I am so good. And I just can't tell you how proud I am of you. I mean, when I saw the book come out last year, right? It was when you released it.
June 15th, on the anniversary of her earning her certificate in France, 100 years to the day, June 15th, 1921, June 15th, 2021.
It doesn't get any better than that. Full circle, 100%. And I want to talk more about the book and I want to talk more about Bessie Coleman, but first, you, lady, why did you do it? This is such an inspirational story. Why did you do it? How did you do it? How does one leave everything they know midlife, switch careers, and become a commercial pilot at the age of 54? How'd you do it?
So it wasn't so easy, but if we roll the clock back 20 years before that. So I had quit my job. I was the vice president for Foot Locker stores, and the first, I know I was one of the youngest vice presidents they ever had. First Black female, it was all that stuff. I had a great job. I had a wonderful boss. I handpicked my team. I had an office in New York, LA, Chicago. So it was an amazing job. I had an amazing role. I really enjoyed it, but I was always on an airplane. And I always wanted to fly. So at about 36, I quit my job. Went to flight school. Look at your face. I went to flight school full time.
Let me stop you for 1 second. So you said you always wanted to fly. Was this since you were a child?
When I was a little girl, I used to look up in the sky and say, boy, more than anything in the world, I want to be on that airplane flying it.
What was it? Was it your first flight as a child? What sparked that interest in you?
So I don't remember that. And my next flight wasn't until I was 12. So I certainly don't remember any of that, but I just wanted to do it more than anything. But when I was coming along in the 70s, right, girls didn't fly. Black girls who wore pretty eyeglasses like you have on, like I put my contact lenses in, we didn't do that. That's not what you did.
Yeah.
Back then, a lot of pilots came from the military.
Yeah.
And so the military recruited a lot of pilots. Before I figured that out, I think I was probably too old to enlist in any of the pilot training. And then there was my eyesight. So that knocked me out. It was just something I always wanted to do.
What do you mean eyesight? Because you wore glasses, you thought that limited you?
So way back in the day, it did.
Oh.
Way back in the day, if you didn't have perfect vision, 20/20 vision, uncorrected, you could never even be considered for a pilot slot.
Oh my goodness, I never knew that.
There's a landmark case that happened late. Oh geez, I guess it was sometime in the 80s that changed things. But it wasn't even an option for me when I was going to college and graduate school and all that other stuff. So I did other stuff that I liked. I did other stuff I was good at. And then two things happened in my life. One, I met my husband, and well, we'd gone to college together, and we met on the subway. And he said, "How about lunch?" I said, "How about dinner?" Uh, we had dinner, and he said, "Tell me what do you really want to do more than anything?" And I just thought it was such an intriguing question. No one had ever asked me that.
Mm.
And I was doing and moving and grooving. I had worked at the NFL before that. Go back even further, I was a police reporter. I'd gone to Columbia Graduate School. I'd done a lot of stuff. So no one ever said, "Well, what do you really want to do?" Like, you've done this, you've done that. What do you really want to do? And when he said that, Lisa, it was the first time it left my lips.
Mm.
And I said, "I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. But if you laugh at me, if you think I'm ridiculous for saying this, because it seemed ridiculous to me, I guess that's why I never said it."
Mm.
I said, "I'll never see you again."
A
He said, "Oh my goodness. I mean, you
lot of
get none
pressure.
of this, right? A lot of pressure. You get none of this. Are you clear?" And he was like, "Yeah, no left." You know? So I said it. I said, "I want to fly an airplane." 2 weeks later, he gave me gift certificates to go and fly a little plane, wait less than a minivan. And so I did that, came home and said, "That's it, I'm quitting my job." He was like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's figure out a little exit strategy." And it took me about 2 to 3 years. So with that time, I got another job and a signing bonus. We moved to New Jersey. I didn't even know that small airports were all the way around us.
Mm.
I didn't even know how to get started. I've been to college. I've been to an Ivy League grad school. I didn't know how you got started. And you got to remember, back then, the internet was I mean, it was
Yeah.
embryonic,
Yeah.
right? So there was no hop online and figure it out.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that organizations like the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals and Women in Aviation, I didn't even know that they existed.
Mm.
The 99s, that had existed when Amelia Earhart started it,
Yeah.
who, by the way, was 2 years later than Bessie Coleman, who got her certificate in English,
Mhm.
not in
Mm.
French in France, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I didn't even know how to get started. Took the flight. And a couple weeks later, I was on a flight from JFK to Schiphol Airport,
Mhm.
a KLM flight in Amsterdam. And when the pilot came out, it's all before September 11th, the door was open and everything.
Yeah.
When the pilot came out, I think, Lisa, my head was like this. And he looked at me and he said, "Your neck would be better on the flight if you put it up. You won't have a cricket by the time we get to Amsterdam." He said, "What are you looking at?" I said, "When you came out, you opened the door. I'm looking in the flight deck. I'm looking at your cockpit." He said, "Well, why don't you come up here and look at it?"
And how old were you at this point?
34, 34-ish, like that,
Mhm.
33. So I went and sat there and we crossed the North Atlantic at night. And by the time we landed,
He let
I
you
knew
sit in the cockpit during the flight?
the whole time. This is all before September 11th.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
And by the time we landed, that was it. I knew I could do it. I watched him do it. Then I took another job, put away all my money, save, 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 save. Finish the course, which was excruciating. And it took me 8 months to get from that one little flight hour to become a certified flight instructor. About a little bit more than a half dozen licenses and certificates from the FAA. Then you teach to build hours. And as we like to say, it's very backwards. So when you're very, very green, you're teaching. So I'm teaching, I'm building my time. I finished in June of 2001, July, August, September 11th. And our industry went into a stall for about a
Mm.
decade. We call it the lost decade. Well, Michael said to me, by this time we got married, we moved to Jersey. He said, "We should have children." And I said, "Oh my goodness, like, you mean me?" And I was pregnant by the 17th of September, had one, had two. And it just seemed so far away. The idea of having children and working in the regionals and just slogging around the country with an infant and a toddler, it just didn't feel right. So I stayed home and I blinked and a decade went by and another 4 years went by and I turned 50. And I said to Michael, it's now or never. My kids are in middle school.
So
And
you
about the
always had that idea. It never left you, that desire.
never.
How did you suppress it all those years? I mean, really, you have this burning desire to do something that you know you're passionate about and that you love, and you make this decision. It was not, it was a forced decision because of 9/11, obviously, but while you're raising your kids that this is something you have to do. Is that when you
Yeah,
started writing the book?
yes. So I
Okay.
started writing the book, and that helped, a little bit with my kind of mom intellectual desire. I met you and your beautiful children. That helped. Like good friends and family, that helped. But I got to tell you, Lisa, it was so hard. And I watched, by this time, I had a little community and I was still flight instructing, right? So
Mhm.
I was flight instructing when my children were in school. I was writing the book at night. I was busy, busy. I'm always busy,
Yeah.
right? Busy. I'm tired just saying it. But what I think, how do you suppress that? It wasn't feasible.
Yeah.
Everything has a season, right?
Excellent.
Every life has a season. And I've always known what season I'm in.
Mm.
And the right season at that moment was to focus on those two boys and our posse, our group of kids. And you're a mom's mom. So you always had kids over your house. There's
Yeah.
always an extra potato in the pot. And I was having fun.
Yeah.
I was a reluctant parent because I was afraid. Um,
Mm.
I was afraid. I was afraid that I was so selfish. I wouldn't be able to do what I needed to do to raise good citizens. I understood the responsibility of
Mhm.
having children. I watched my sister, who I think is the best mother ever,
Mm.
and I watched how she was very selfless, and I'm not. So I struggled. I struggled. But then when I had my children,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's that hard wiring thing. Thank you, Jesus. So you don't just leave them behind in a parking lot. I'm
But you had
thinking
an amazingly supportive husband. And I
that.
never, I witnessed that, during those years where our kids had many a play dates. And, I'm getting to the book again because I can't wait. But there was, every time I saw you,
What
you
did I
had,
talk
it was
about?
the book, the book, the book, the book. It was like you were immersed in this book. And it was almost as if you had become Bessie Coleman. Like you had to talk about it because she was so much a part of you. And I want to talk about,
So emotional when you say that.
it's so true because that's the one thing. If someone said to me 5 years ago, Carole Hopson, before you release this book, I would say, the book, because you were working on that book and you were so steadfast. And I remember you would go away to your house in the vineyard and you would go away to write. And you would just write and write and write, and every chance you got. And I didn't quite understand the whole schedule. I knew you were flying, doing certain things, but you were so dedicated to your goal. You were just balancing everything. I mean, I was
I
so
love you
impressed by
so
that.
much. I get so emotional because I remember sitting at your kitchen table and I would say, okay, what do you think about this title? What do you think about this title? What do you think about brrr?" And I know that I was driving people around me crazy, but anybody who would listen, I would talk to.
Well, I was fascinated by it. I mean, I thought it was incredible. I mean, I feel like I have a book in me too, which one day I will write, but I was fascinated by the fact that you were taking that on and you were so dedicated to telling about this woman's legacy. I always wonder how much of her do you see in yourself?
So I wish there was more of her in me.
Mm.
I think that she was a superhero, and you talked about it, and I called it the laser, right? Laser focus. Like I'm gonna do this no matter what, and that's how she was. So
Yes.
when she wanted to fly an airplane, and no one in the United States would teach her, she started learning French at night at age 26. The book opens with something that happened in February. Jesus Christ, tomorrow, February 4th, 1923. And she has a terrible accident. And she lives to talk about it. And 100 years ago, 100 and, well, she was born 130 years ago, but 100 years ago, if you had a terrible accident, the medicine, what people did in order to help you survive, was not as advanced as it is today.
Yeah.
So when I learned of her accident, I talked with trauma surgeons. I interviewed
Ah,
half dozen trauma surgeons. What happens when you fall from a building? What happens when people operate on people who've broken their femur, the longest, strongest bone in the human body? How do you fix it now? How did you fix it back then? And I would run into people. And I always say I wasn't smart enough to finish it on my own, so she'd make me trip on stuff. So, Joshua's in the hospital for something. So we got to deal with a sports medicine doc. So
mm,
he starts talking to me about pins and pegs. And that's what they used to call the ivory that
mm,
they fixed people's limbs with. This is right after World War I.
yeah.
So we had to set the stage.
Yeah.
And I kept writing. You said, girl, I was writing the damn book and writing it, writing it, right. And I had to get it right so that someone today could understand how people lived 100 years ago.
And
How
you know
blessed.
what? I'm sorry. I just have to say that's one thing that I so love about this book, because it's so painfully obvious that the way you write it so beautifully, so descriptively, and
Oh,
you have to have had training, some type of aviation training, in order to write the way you did. And I just wanted to read a passage that just I love the way you wrote it.
yes, I love being read too. Read it.
Okay. I should have turned the light on because, glasses aren't all I need these days. These are readers, but okay.
As good as you
So,
do, baby.
so this is the passage that you're talking about, that where you start the book and she's having this near fatal accident. I pushed the throttle forward and the engine grumbled in response. Then the rudder pedals sprang to life beneath my feet. When I had first learned to fly, steering the plane with my feet had been a revelation. I pushed the right foot pedal and the plane veered in the right. Pushed the left foot control and the machine slewed left. By now, using the balls of my feet to steer on the ground or to leave the stick in the air had become second nature. I didn't have to think at all. To keep the airplane going straight, my boots danced on the rudder pedals, right, 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 then a little left, then right. And it goes on and on. But if you didn't have the training you had, you wouldn't be able to be descriptive, because you can feel yourself. I'm sure you've flown a plane like that or similar.
So I'm so glad you asked that question. So the first couple of years when I would write scenes like that, they were flat.
Hmm.
And I came up here and I met a guy who
Mhm.
owned a World War II biplane.
Ah.
And they did biplane rides in it here in the vineyard.
Mhm.
So when I met him, I said, hey, Mike, I would love to be able to fly this airplane. He said, listen, let me explain something to you. He said, you fly jets, right? Yes, yes, I do. He said, I can't teach you because you, I just can't. It's so different. It would be
Mhm.
like as if you or I went and hopped into an 18-wheeler, right? There's
Mhm.
30 some odd years. It's a manual train. It would be so different, he said, that I can't give you enough in a few lessons to get you to do what you want, what you say you want to do. Fast forward, I met one of his, he has three pilots, well, himself and two others. And this guy, his wife walked away and left him with these two boys.
Mm.
And the boys would run around the airport all summer. So I said, listen, Mike, do you mind if I come every morning at 6 in the morning? I pick up them boys, I bring them to my house. But before I wake them up, Eric was the pilot's name, and I will go warm up the airplanes. He had two. And he said, yeah, that's okay. So for 3 summers, I bartered babysitting for learning how to fly a pilot so I could write them scenes.
Still making deals.
Still making deals.
Love
You see that?
it.
You see that dollar behind your head? Still making.
I
And
love it.
for three
Wow.
summers, I would go and warm up the planes with him,
Mhm.
bring his boys back, keep his boys for a week, take them back, and learn how to do the stunts in the biplane.
Tell me about the first time you flew a plane where you were at the controls. What was that like for you?
Oh my God. So I went to a school in Morristown, New Jersey,
Oh.
and you trained and you trained and you trained.
Mhm.
And then this is what happened. My instructor, he was a
Mhm.
man named is a man named Patrick Laughlin, very Irish with a thick Irish brogue. I could understand about 50% of what Patrick would say when he would get excited, which was often. And so we pulled up to the flight line and he said, "Now I have a surprise for you today." I said, "What's my surprise? What do you got?" He said, "I'm gonna have you shut the engine down." And I did. He said, "Today is a day." I said, "What day? Day for what?" He said, "Today is a day that you're going to solo." I said, "No." And then, as I thought about it, I said, "Well, my instructor thinks I'm ready. I'm ready." And he hopped out and he came around to my window and he said, "Three things are going to happen. One, when you take off, the airplane will be a lot lighter because I'm not sitting in that seat."
Mm,
Yeah. "What's two?" He said, "Two, you are going to remember this until the last time you close your eyes. And
mm.
three, you're a goddess." Now,
Awesome.
I had not had that sort of affirmation, that kindness from a lot of the white men I had worked with, flown with,
Mhm.
um, even as a student instructor.
Yeah.
So Patrick was tailor made for me. And
Wow.
I'm grateful for him. Anyway, he hopped out and he was right. That thing just popped off the runway like a cap out of a champagne bottle.
Were you
Boing!
scared?
Yes! Yes! And exhilarated and shivers and all of that. And then I was flying and talking to the air traffic control all by myself, and there was no Patrick. Um, and I knew at that moment that I could take this all the way. I knew it. Like at that moment, I knew it. I just knew it.
Wow. Well, tell me a little bit more about the process itself of becoming a pilot. You talked about the flight school and then training. Like, what are the steps?
So I love that question because it is so steeped in mystery.
Mhm.
How does one become a pilot for a major airline? How does one get started? So these days, it's a lot easier than it used to. There are all sorts of programs and ACE academies, which is what Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals teaches. So for 1 week, students learn everything airplane. And then after they learn everything airplane, they go and they take a flight. And
Mhm.
that's pretty darn fantastic.
Wow.
Well, now, I mean, they're with a flight instructor, but right. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, so they're in the air and they get to experience it. So those kind of things weren't, it wasn't prolific. There weren't a lot of those things a
Yeah.
long time ago. So you could do a program like that. And then here go the steps. There's a private pilot certificate. It's one of the hardest because it's the first and it's the biggest step.
Mm.
Next is the instrument, and next is a commercial. So that commercial is just a designation that you can be paid to fly. And that happens at a minimum of 250 hours.
Which
So
usually takes how long?
it depends who you're talking to. So
Okay.
mine took about 3.5 months. I was flying like people breathe and eat. I got my private pilot in 2 months. I was up in my commercial in about 3.5, almost 4 months. And I did my commercial check ride at like 253 hours. And I joined a program. The program I joined was called All ATPs. And you did 6 check rides in 3 months. I wouldn't highly recommend that to every student
Mhm.
because the pressure to not fail is so, it's in every single thing that you do. So some
Mhm.
people don't perform well like that. For
Mhm.
me, that's what I needed.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, I also knew that there were other needs. So the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, which has been my fraternity for 20 years, we helped to start a flight school named after Lieutenant Colonel Weathers, Tuskegee Airmen, in Olive Branch, Mississippi, right next
Wow.
to Tennessee. And we
Wow.
started the flight school in 2018. Now,
Hmm.
that program takes a year from 0 hours to flight instructor.
Hmm.
Then, after that, you come back around, and then that individual flight instructs. So
Ah.
that you build your time. And then at 1,500 hours, then you're ready for an airline.
Was there any point in time during your journey that you doubted your decision?
Yes.
Really? Tell me about that.
I think once, and here I go, once you become a parent, you're hardwired for that. And it was so hard after being, the senior flight instructor, writing my book, kind of having my little life the way I wanted. So I think my life was so comfortable.
Mm. Mhm.
Now to step out of that and go to the regional airlines. And now, so my first airline job, I was 50 and I went to ExpressJet Airlines. And girl, it was like a bath of cold water every day because the training was for me, and the people, some of the people who trained me were harsh.
Mm. In what way?
Well, I'm sure they weren't used to seeing a lot of Black women. Um, I was older, but I don't know that I looked a whole bunch older then. I think I have plenty of energy, right?
Yeah.
But I know that some people were uncomfortable. Why
Mm.
are you here? You're
Mm.
supposed to take the flight attendant bus. What are you doing?
Mm.
No, no, no. This is right here. We're doing pilots. It's over across the street where the flight attendants are. So I mean, that was a consistent theme. I was so I mean, I can't say it didn't bother me, but that bothered me less. But and I never got funky about that. Like I never said, "Oh, that's an insult." I never did.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't address it. It was too much energy.
Yeah.
But where did I doubt myself? To get it up and start working after I had spent these 14, almost 15 years at home,
Mm.
very comfortable. And to go to a regional airline is an apprenticeship. So it's almost like at 50, I was going back doing the jobs that people around me were in their 20s. And you're flying 6 legs a day, 4, 5, 6 legs a day. One of my trips was Newark. I can almost not say it. Newark to Baltimore, Baltimore to Newark, Newark to Baltimore, Baltimore to Newark, Newark to Baltimore, Baltimore to Newark, Baltimore overnight. Do it again. I did that for like 4 days in a row, and that was what was known as a pairing a trip. So it's a lot of work. You leave, you take off, you land, then you
Yeah.
take off, you land some of the most complicated airspace in the world, and you're up and down in 22 minutes, and you're doing that 6 times a day.
Oh my
You
gosh.
overnight, get to your hotel, you got 12 hours. You sleep, you get up, you do it again the next day, 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 and
What
then you
kept
go,
you going?
and I'm gonna cry now. I don't know. I knew that this is what I wanted to do.
Mm.
I knew this is what I had to do to get good at my craft. I knew that that apprenticeship mattered. It was painful as hell, but it mattered. I couldn't skip that step. I don't care how cute I thought I was. I don't care how comfortable I was in my last life. That apprenticeship, those situations, emergencies, procedures, getting them down, flying and talking and making sure the airplane was safe. It's like playing a violin. It's like speaking a foreign language. It's like making dinner. The more you do it, the better you get at
Mm. Got
it.
it.
And yeah, I mean, when you're speaking a foreign language and it's not your tongue, you got to do it often to be good.
You ever have any close calls?
Yes.
Really? Oh, I want to hear about this. Give me
I
more.
don't know if I'm
Give
gonna
me
talk
more.
about them on air. Sure. Listen, and here was the other thing. That's the point of it. That you train so hard, that you train so long, that you train in so many conditions, that you fly in weather, hot weather, cold weather, de-ice the plane. You get so good at doing the routine that when something happens, you do the routine while you're fixing the other problem. And you're doing it in Newark with a tailwind pushing you towards the airport at 600 miles an hour. So you get good at it. You get good at it. You get really good at
Okay, so you can't give me one close call?
it.
Just one.
I probably have only had three
Uh-huh.
that have made my, made my heart beat a little fast. And all of them, all three of them have had to do with just equipment. So when something fails, one of the most amazing thing about today's airplanes, look at your face, is gripping, is that there are redundant systems. And so really, once again, like knowing your airplane,
Yeah.
just like you know your children or you know your pet, you
Mm-hmm.
better know that darn plane.
Yeah.
So when something fails, what's my redundant system? What do I depend on? How do I manage without this primary system?
Right.
And in each case, the blip was having to use a redundant system. And
Okay.
when we landed, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
So no one
Only,
would know.
no, only once a flight attendant came up and she said, "You guys are, y'all are sweating a little." Jane." I was like,
You picked up on it?
I've been wearing that damn shirt for 4 days in a row anyway. Shh, quiet. Can't talk like that, United Airlines. But that was before United. That was with
That was
United.
before United. Got it. Got it. Disclaimer. So now that you are a commercial pilot for United, you know how most athletes and actresses, they have a routine that they're like, okay, did it, game on. Do you have one of those?
I sure do.
What's your
I love,
routine?
I love music. So I play it real loud and real bold before I get where I'm going. And I
What's your
like,
favorite song to play?
okay, so this is going to be that kind of a little bit of a shocker to
Come
people,
on.
but I love the Stones. I love the Rolling Stones. I mean, I love all genres of music, but to get me ready to go and do that thing, I absolutely love Give Me Shelter.
Oh, wow. I would have not expected that. Well, after all this, I cannot imagine the feeling, the euphoria that you experience when you step foot into an airport. What is that like for you? I mean, this is your dream. This is something you've worked for years on. What's it like every time you step into the airport knowing you're about to fly?
I feel very proud. I feel like every day that I walk in there, I got to bring my A game.
And you are an anomaly. And I want to talk about that too. I mean, I want to talk about the statistics,
Oh,
break
yeah.
down those numbers because there are so few Black female pilots. It's unbelievable. Talk about those statistics.
So here we go. So in the US, there's somewhere around 140,000. Now that number changes. So let's just use a number 120 to 140,000. Of that number, 2.5% are African American. Let's just make it three. That number has not changed in probably 30 years. So 4% are African American, right? So let's do easy math, right? 4% of 100,000 is 4,000. So that's in all of the US. The number of women are somewhere around 5%.
Mhm.
Every single decade, the number of women has increased 1% for the last 5 decades. Think about that. The number of Black women
Crazy.
who fly for a living on a professional, not the commercial, because remember the commercial means you have the 250 hours, although I'll include them. I
Yeah.
don't even care, I'll include them.
Yeah.
But the number of women who fly for United, for FedEx, for Delta, for UPS, for American Airlines, that number is less than 100. United has the most. We have 17 Black women out of 12,000 pilots.
Goodness gracious. What? Why?
So
Why is
when I
the percentage so small?
Well, when I think about how hard it was for me to get those certificates and ratings, and by the way, so this is a great place to talk about this, the segue. So it used to be that if you went and got all those certificates and ratings, it was between 100 and $150,000. That's post
Mm.
college. So let's
Ah,
say you get through college and you really want to do this and you take off on, well, that's about 150 just to get you to the point where you can go to the regionals. Now you have
wow.
to survive and eat, right? To get
Right.
yourself through that. Flight instructors finally are being paid a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
but only because we really need them.
Mm-hmm.
And so supply and demand. So it's a very hard career to attract women to. They think, oh my God, I can't have kids. There are people who get to the major airlines and then have their children, and it's wonderful. So you could have kids now, lifestyle balance.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a career that doesn't say, okay, we're open for business women, come on aboard. It's an industry that has not attracted many people because they haven't come through the pipeline of that
Mm.
pipeline or of a STEM pipeline.
Right.
So a lot of the guys I fly with, I always ask them the question, same questions you asked me. How'd you get started? Oh, my dad was a pilot for NASA for 30 years. Oh, my dad worked for Southwest. Oh, my uncle was American and my dad was Delta. I picked United because I wanted to be different, or whatever.
Right.
But
Right.
there's always a dad or an uncle or somebody
Yeah.
who helped get them started. So they even knew about those licenses that you asked
Mm.
me earlier.
Right.
Every
First
flight
hand.
test, yeah, every flight test is three parts. It's a written, it's an oral, and it's a flight in the airplane. Well, where do I go to sign up for that? How do I study for something like
Well, in clear Carol fashion, you are doing something about that deficit. And I love the name Jet Black Foundation. That is hot.
that? Okay,
That's
so here's how it happened.
uh,
So my sister said, "Girl, your hair is jet jet black foundation." I was like, "Hot! It is so hot!"
it is. It really is. I love it. But tell me more about the 100 pairs of wings. How do you plan to get 100 African American women to flight school? That's a huge undertaking.
I'm gonna need another net. I'm gonna need another net. Okay. Here, so here's what we're doing. One thing that has just made my job a little bit easier is that there is this interest, right?
Mhm.
And finally, with the pilot shortage, it has gotten real. So, for example, United bought a flight school in Phoenix, Arizona, and named it Aviate. And so that pipeline takes students from 0 hours to the regionals and from the regionals then to United. That
Ah,
pathway is assured, right? So I'm taking a page out of the book of the folks that I work with. Our goal is to get young people, young women, young Black women interested. So I'm working with a high school in the Bronx. It's a STEM high school. Some of the things on my list to do, Spelman, um, and about a good 6 institutions I work with to get real good relationships with and funnel them to that Lieutenant Colonel Luke Weathers Flight Academy in Olive Branch, Mississippi, which is run by two men. One is my mentor of 20 years. He was a
mm,
captain with FedEx for 44 years. And
wow.
the other guy, his partner, is a captain for UPS. So you got FedEx and UPS, two airlines training pilots to be airline pilots. Amazing game changer.
Wow.
And his name is Captain Jeff Harrison. He flies the 747 for UPS all around the world. So I say all that to say that that flight school is a game changer.
Mm.
Here's why. It's a 501c3 because it's through OBAP. So we can get people through at a third of the cost of
Ah,
what it would cost them to go through.
got it.
So my goal is to raise $7 million. I want each woman to earn her own pair of wings and pay for her private pilot. If you were to get your private pilot in New York or LA, it would be somewhere close to $20,000. In Phoenix or Atlanta or Detroit, kind of that middle belt of the country, it would
Mm,
be $15,000.
mm.
At Luke Weathers, because we are a nonprofit school, we're not making a profit, it's somewhere around half of that. It's about
Oh,
$8,000.
oh,
I want
wow.
her to do that. Why? Because it's the first step. Once you show that you got some sweat equity, we'll
Yeah.
help with the rest. We mentor the pilots. I had a woman named Robin Murphy from Endeavor Airlines go down the other day and give an interview seminar. Why? That interview is critical. The interview for airlines is very unique.
Hmm.
Tell me, Lisa, it's a dark and stormy night. You've lost hydraulic pressure. There are three airports. And there's also another situation, door one, door two, or door three. Which would you select? Say door two. And then all of a sudden, you've also lost something else. And then there's this airport, this airport, this airport. Which
Hmm.
would you select? Would you land or continue? It's like that.
Hmm.
And we got to get you ready for that.
Yeah.
And that interview prep is something that our kids don't get. So my goal is
Hmm.
to bring a professional down every single month to talk to them about what does that flight resume look like for you? What does that um, what does that all important job interview? What is it like? How do you manage for your first jet
Hmm.
training?
Yeah.
So that's my goal at that flight school. We have about 50 students
Oh,
every
wow.
year. We graduated 5 Black female CFIs. And
Wow.
we've been there since 2018, kicking butt.
Amazing. That's amazing. Wow.
I want
Congratulations.
this is
Eh,
like it sounds like a lot, but it's been a 2 decade build. Book,
Gotcha.
you
Yeah.
know, in the flight school, trying to get my own little fledgling career. I wanted to promote the book as a working pilot. I stand on Bessie Coleman's shoulders. The Tuskegee Airmen, they came around in the 40s. Bessie was in the 20s.
Right.
And
Right.
it's so important, like to get the time frame because we forget she was before Amelia.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the book too. How did you go about researching? Because it is a historical fiction. How much of the book is fiction? How much of the book is nonfiction?
So the book is so close to her life. It's so close to her life. Now there's plenty of fictional elements in there. Like we know that she went to on her second flight, she went to Berlin, Amsterdam, and to Paris, Berlin, and Amsterdam to be an aerobatic pilot.
Mhm.
But for example, what were her instructors like? What kind of conversations did they have? I know that she went to the Air Force base in Germany that she went to. I know that she flew over Kaiser Wilhelm II's um, palace in Potsdam, Germany. But what was that like for
And
her?
all the characters, I have to say, I mean, all the characters just really come alive. So it's as if they were real people. I'm sure Mr. Abbott was a real person, the
All
founder of
real.
the Chicago Defender. But I mean, you talk about her life from the time that she was the daughter of a sharecropper, then when she went to Chicago and her in-laws, and then you take her to France, and then you take her to Florida where she died. I mean, but all the
And I went
characters.
to every one of those places.
So did she
And
really walk 9 miles every day to flight
yes,
school?
yes, yes.
Unbelievable.
And I got my weight down to where I think that she was, and I'm
Uh-huh.
probably an inch or two taller than she. And I bought a pair of boots and they're being healed right now. I fly with them every day. I fly with these boots, and I have every day for the last 7 years. Um, but I bought a pair of boots that were built like shoes were made back then. So just
Hmm.
leather bottom, and there wasn't all this fantastic air and technology and this thing. They were just leather and comfortable and covered your feet, right? Little teeny weeny little inch heel. And I bought those boots and then I walked the 9 miles to the flight school from northern France. We flew to
Wow.
Paris. And while we were on the flights, I would call these convergences, not coincidence. I just kept looking at the ticket and the date. It was the same date that she had gotten on an ocean liner to go over to France, that I was on an Air France first class ticket. And I thought about how blessed I was that I had the modern conveniences that she was clearly denied, and how her trip and steerage during the worst times of the year. Today we call it hurricane season, right? But
Mm-hmm.
back then, I don't know if they called it hurricane season, but
Yeah.
in November, that was when you had the most hurricane. That's when the trips were the cheapest, and
Mm.
so that was the day. And I was telling my niece this, and she was like, "Oh, Carol, that means you understood how cold it was, or the kind of jacket that you needed, or were you chilly, or what it was like at night."
Mm.
So we flew to Paris. Then I got on a train like she would have to the north of France. And picture the Hamptons to New York,
Mm-hmm.
and the Rotois was to Paris. So the Parisians, the wealthy Parisians, would summer and vacation in the Rotois. And so I thought when I read a lot of the research that she had flown over the mustard fields in France, but she didn't. Her flight school was on the beach in a
Oh.
part of France that was the Normandy region. And so they speak a little dialect up there
Uh-huh.
that made speaking French even harder.
Yes.
That meant going up there, she couldn't stay at Le Quatois because it was too expensive. So she had to stay in a town called Roux. And so Roux is 9 miles away. So I got a little room in an inn and walked the 9 miles. And it took me about 2 hours and 15 minutes. And I was moving. And the first mile, like the little fat in the back of my arms and my back itched. Second mile itched a little bit more. And I was like, oh, it's uncomfortable. Like the shoes are flat and
Yeah.
they don't absorb any of the energy from your step.
Yeah.
And as I would walk fast, I would itch more. And then 2 or 3 miles, I was like, okay, no more itch. Mile 4, I was almost like running. By 6, I was running. And I was like, well, I got to hurry up and get there because I started out a little bit later. And I stayed there so long, just waxing about the beach and
Mm.
picking up sand and imagining, oh my God. So if she flew on the beach and you only had 2 or 3 gallons in your little teeny weeny tank in these biplanes,
Yeah.
that meant that you had to know when to go and when to come back so that your runway wasn't underwater. So then that made me think about the moons, right? There's 8 of them. There's waxing and gibbons and crescent. Oh, shoot. Damn, she was smarter than hell. What the hell? Like I had to go there and think about that. And she didn't.
Wow.
And so I'm there on the beach and I'm weeping and the experience is very emotional. I said, it's getting dark. I got to go. And I start walking back. Now, I had a compass like she would have had. I had, you know, the direction I was going.
Mm-hmm.
And girl, it was dark as hell walking back.
Mm.
And it's not like here where you're going to make a left on Ninth Street and a right on Sycamore. They were dirt roads. And as I'm walking, I hear a wolf. I hear screech owls. I get to a
Oh
place
my gosh.
where as I walk, I was like, do I turn left or right? Look
Well, I have
behind
to
me.
ask you, so how did she do it in a time when, it's hard now for a female, but back
Hard
then
not.
even harder for a female. She's an African American female, went to France to learn, had to learn how to speak French in order to know how to learn how to fly because everyone denied her entry into flight school in the US. How did she do it? Where did she get the money?
So she had 2 backers. One was one who you mentioned, Robert Abbott. So,
Mhm.
and you asked me a question, which I really have to
Mhm.
address. Who was fictional, who wasn't? So
Yeah.
Norma, her best friend, was an amalgam of women I met during my research.
Ah.
Is fictional, but she is a woman who I met again and again and again and again and again and again and again. They were
Mm.
domestics, they were seamstresses, they were musicians, they were the things that we now can't find enough of in this country. They
Mm.
were people who worked, they were women who, um, oh God, gives me a shiver just to say it. They bore the labor of this country on their backs. Their fingers literally did the work of a nation.
Mm.
And these were her friends. These were people who were at her church. They were women who put her up when she was in these different cities barnstorming. They were the salt of the earth that made the United States, that we built this country on. And when you walk past, I can't help it. There's a scene way late in the book where she's going into the mansion, the governor's mansion in Texas, and she looks at the bricks that are the steps of the governor's mansion, and she knows that they were crafted by slaves, like her mother. Susan Coleman had been born a slave. Bessie was born in 1892. And so, how did she do it? I believe that, first of all, she was a flippin' superhero. She was the first of her family to go to college. She couldn't afford to stay. So the sense of flight training was just out. It was out the window.
Yeah.
There were two men who supported her. One was her lover, and one was her mentor. And they helped her to get to France. Once she got to France, the flight school that she was intending to go to said, I'm so sorry, but France is not training any more women. Excuse me, our flight school is not training any more women because two women just died.
Oh, yes, I remember that
France
from the book.
cannot have its mothers and its daughters die falling out of planes.
And that was factual.
That was factual.
Wow.
So she has to find another flight school. Can you imagine? Yeah, Jesus, you manage to work your way up from Waxahachie, Texas to Chicago.
Yeah.
You get a job, you earn money, you save it, you make powerful allies. These are self-made millionaires in the teens. It would be like hooking up with Robert Smith. Hey, Mr. Smith, I need you to help me, right?
Yeah, right.
By the way, if you're listening, Mr. Smith, I could use your help. It would be like powerful men like that.
Yeah.
These men were Black men who were self-made millionaires in the teens. She made them her allies and made them believe that she could do this. One was not the first publisher, but the biggest publisher, Robert Abbott in Chicago, the Chicago Defender. The other was Jesse Binga, who became her lover, and he was the Black banker, the first Black banker in Chicago. What? So then she gets over there, finds out that she can't go to that school. Can you imagine sitting there on the curb just boo-hooing? And she did that for about a minute. And she did this. Let's figure out what I'm about to do next.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another one over there. And
There's no stopping her.
No stopping.
Relentless.
Relentless. I think it was relentlessness. I think what she had was extraordinary problem-solving skills. She was a critical thinker, and she was incisive, and she was surgical. I think that she was disciplined. I think she was relentless. I think she was intrepid, all those things. But I think one of her best skills was solving problems, figuring stuff out.
And the fact that she had the wherewithal, the gumption in that day and age to listen to her brother say, no, you can't do this, after coming back as a pilot from World War I, and say, oh, yes, I can, despite all the odds she was facing.
All of them. Insurmountable.
Yes, insurmountable. And it's just a testament to just the wonderful story. This book, you have got to get it. It is amazing, A Pair of Wings. And I'm
going to send you your signed copy.
Please send me my signed copy, please, because I want to encase it in something, keep it nice. Because this one, I mean, this is a big book. This is a thick book. Getting through this but it was so enjoyable, every minute of it. And Carole, I just want to say you are truly an inspiration, and you are just a shining example of not letting anything get in your way. And it's never too late to go after your dreams.
No, it isn't. It's never too late. Never. And I just want to say how much I enjoy you. You're one of my favorite moms. Aww. And I love the way you raise your boys. And you were always very, very sensible. And I found that moms in my community who were smart, who were sensible, I wanted to be with them and learn from them. And I learned from you. And I think that you're tops.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. And thank you for taking the time out to talk to me. I've learned even more. And you've got to, where can people find out more about Jet Black and 100 Pair of Wings?
Yeah, I
All
love it.
right.
100 pairs of wings.
Yeah.
So here's where Jet Black Foundation. Now listen, we would love to have your support. If it's $5, if it's $10, if it's
Mhm.
$100. Jet Black Foundation, there's a donate button there. We're a 501c3. We're very, very proud. Our goal is to send 100 Black women to flight school. My website is Carole Hopson, CaroleHopson.com. There's some pretty remarkable things about the book and about my journey. If you so endeavor, please go onto Amazon and leave us a review of the book. Thank you. Thank you.
100.
That helps.
A pair of wings.
Yeah, and that's
Yes.
it. That's the
Well,
story.
Carole, thank you so much. I love you. You are
I love
amazing.
you. And I love your audience too, because if they're listening to you, they're smart.
Oh,
So,
you're such a sweetheart. Well, thank you so much again, and good luck with everything. Mwah. All
next
right.
is movie. So I have to come back on when the movie's done.
Yes, yes, the movie. Oh, that will be incredible.
And
Incredible.
my other goal is to do an audio book, and it's going to be a huge reveal and surprise.
I can't wait to hear. It's going to be awesome.